Night security guards who caught an intruder red-handed. What's the smartest thing you did to survive the confrontation? I was making my rounds at the abandoned textile factory when my flashlight caught something moving on the third floor. My boots froze against the concrete as I watched a shadow slip behind the broken machinery. The radio on my belt crackled with static and made me flinch. I reached down and turned the volume off because I needed to hear everything around me. My hand moved to the small canister of pepper spray on my hip. The factory had been empty for 6 years, and nobody was supposed to be here except me. I took 3 slow steps toward the stairwell and heard glass crunch somewhere above me. My heart started pounding against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The emergency exit sign flickered twice and cast red shadows across the dusty floor. I pulled out my phone and saw 0 bars of service. My mouth went completely dry as I started climbing the metal stairs. Each step echoed through the empty building like a warning bell. I gripped the cold railing and felt rust flake off under my fingers. Something heavy scraped across the floor directly above my head. I reached the 3rd floor landing and pressed my back against the wall. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness and revealed overturned filing cabinets everywhere. Papers were scattered across the ground like someone had been searching for something specific. I noticed fresh footprints in the thick layer of dust leading toward the old supervisor's office. My breathing got louder and I had to cover my mouth with my sleeve. A door slammed somewhere in the distance and I nearly dropped my flashlight. I heard voices now, more than one person talking in hushed tones. My legs started shaking as I crouched behind a rusted conveyor belt. The pepper spray felt pathetically small in my sweating palm. I watched 2 figures emerge from the darkness, carrying what looked like duffel bags. They were loading something into the bags from a hole they had cut in the wall. My stomach dropped when I realized they were pulling out bricks of cash. One of them turned and his flashlight swept across the room just inches from my hiding spot. I stopped breathing and pressed myself flat against the cold metal. I assumed they were just regular thieves who would run if confronted. My training had prepared me for drunk teenagers and homeless people seeking shelter. I figured I could radio for backup and let the police handle this situation professionally. My hand slowly reached for the radio, but then I noticed something that changed everything. One of the men set down his bag and I saw a holstered gun on his hip. The other one pulled out a pistol and checked the magazine before sliding it back in. These were not random burglars looking for copper wire to sell. I watched them work with military precision, covering angles and communicating with hand signals. My entire body went cold when I recognized the security company logo on one of their jackets. It was the same company that employed me. They were using our patrol schedules to know exactly when this building would be empty. My own coworkers were robbing the place, and I was the only witness. The cash in the wall must have been hidden here for decades by the original factory owners. I tried to crawl backward toward the stairs, but my elbow knocked against a loose pipe. The sound rang out like a gunshot in the silent building. Both men spun around, and their flashlights found me instantly. I scrambled to my feet, and my pepper spray clattered uselessly to the ground. The bigger one raised his weapon and pointed it directly at my chest. He stepped closer, and I recognized his face from the break room. His name was Derek, and he had trained me on my first week. He tilted his head and spoke calmly. "Wrong night for overtime, rookie." My hands shot up above my head automatically. The other man moved behind me, and I heard him chamber around. Derek shook his head slowly and gestured toward the hole in the wall. He wanted me to see how much money they were taking. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to stay standing. Derek grabbed my collar and shoved me toward the supervisor's office. My shoulder slammed against the doorframe, and pain exploded down my arm. The other man started zip-tying my wrists behind my back. I felt the plastic cut into my skin as he pulled it tight. My mind was racing through every possible escape route. I noticed the old fire alarm box on the wall behind Derek's head. The glass was already cracked from years of neglect. I pretended to stumble and fell forward against the wall. My forehead smashed into the fire alarm, and the glass shattered everywhere. The ancient system somehow still worked, and sirens exploded through the entire building. Derek cursed and covered his ears from the deafening noise. Red emergency lights started spinning and casting everything in bloody shadows. The other man grabbed their bags and sprinted toward the back stairs. Derek looked at me with pure hatred in his eyes. He raised his gun, but then headlights swept across the windows from outside. Someone had already called the police about the alarm. Derek ran after his partner and left me bleeding on the floor. I heard their footsteps pounding down the metal staircase. My wrists were still bound, but I managed to get to my feet. I stumbled to the window and watched them sprint toward a van parked behind the building. Blue and red lights were already flooding the parking lot from 3 different directions. The police had been running surveillance on this factory for weeks. They had suspected someone was using it for money laundering, but needed evidence. Derek and his partner ran directly into a wall of officers with weapons drawn. I watched them drop to their knees and lace their fingers behind their heads. An officer found me 20 minutes later, still zip-tied and shaking. The detective told me the fire alarm saved my life. Derek had killed 2 other witnesses in previous jobs. I quit security work the next morning and handed in my badge without saying a word.